Greetings, everyone. My name is Adrian Miller, and welcome to another update to the cold case on the murder of John Doughtry. Last time we listened to the taped interviews of Lacey Holder and Derek Shepard, the two employees from the Drunken Bell who discovered the body of John Doughtry. Now, if you remember at the end of last week, there was one key aspect that was bothering me. What was going on with Jack, and why was he not interviewed? Based on what Derek reported in his interview with the detectives, Jack had something very important to say about that night, or at the bare minimum, something interesting, yet he was never interviewed. Besides the vague police note that I brought up last time, which stated that Jack was out of town and that they were going to try to talk to him on a later date, and that was it. While I wish I could tell you that I found Jack and got the answers I was looking for, I can't. However, I have something close to an answer. I found Lacey Holder and she agreed to an on-the-record interview. Now, before I play this, I want to mention a couple things. First off, I apologize for the lackluster audio on Lacey's end. I'm still new to the audio production, and Lacey doesn't have any sort of equipment aside from the mic that was built into her laptop, let alone the knowledge to record her audio herself. We ended up having a conversation over Skype, and I had to record the call myself. While at times the conversation seems to go off topic, she had some very interesting insight into the morale at the Drunken Bell during that time, as well as what was going on with Jack. There is a lot, but it was a very intriguing conversation to say the least. Here's what she had to say. Alright, so, first of all, can you confirm that I have permission to record our conversation? This is for the purpose of covering the Drunken Bell murder case from 5 years ago, which I will be including in my audio series on the case.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you so much. Now, Lacey, I want to say just how excited I am to finally get to speak with you. I have so many questions and I didn't think I'd be able to get a hold of you. This is amazing.
Wow, that's a first. I'm not used to random people being so excited to talk to me, especially a journalist.
Well, after looking into this case for the past couple weeks, I figured I would try to get a hold of you to see if you can shed some light on the ordeal from your perspective.
I'll definitely try my best. Adrian?
So what was the general morale of everyone at the Drunken Bell during the time of the discovered body?
It was shaky. Some people were really concerned for our safety, but others were they just didn't want to talk about it. There were some people, like Derek, who blamed this all on the group of people that were attending the event that night. You know, calling them hateful terms that I'm super uncomfortable with, saying that they cursed this establishment for an eternity.
Are you serious? They went that far with their comments?
Those were the nicer things that they had to say. I tried to forget the other things they said, but trust me, they were horrible. It didn't help with our mood as well. I mean, the bar was closed for like a solid week after the body was found. We lost a lot of business after we were cleared to return to work. For a long while, at least. I know it started to pick back up when I quit. I guess enough that the place is still open today.
And how long after this incident did you quit?
I was there for 2 more months. This whole thing not only scared me for years, but it ruined things between Derek and I. I'm sure you've heard, about that mess.
I've become quite familiar with that thanks to listening to Derek's interview. If it's any consolation, Derek gets torn apart by one of the detectives. It's pretty brutal.
Oh, really? I mean, we weren't doing anything wrong, I guess. It personally felt wrong, but I was young. He was older with a promise of being able to treat me the way a woman should be treated. But then this whole situation happened and it changed everything. Well, Derek didn't. I guess he was always an asshole. He was twisting what was happening to make me look like the bad guy, and it totally wrecked my relationship with my coworkers. It's fucked up. Someone was murdered in our bar, but they're all mad at me for hooking up with Derek. I'm just glad that I had Jack to talk to. He let me tell my side of the story. Derek was so tough and cool, but he was just a giant homophobic douche. I'm sorry, Adrian. I don't mean to get off track.
No, don't be sorry at all, Lacey. It's actually fascinating to hear that how this murder affected people who weren't directly related to the victim. Do you still think about the day you found the body?
You never forget the day you find a body, Adrian. It's haunting. I still have nightmares about it, but not as much as before. I kind of just withdrew from everyone after I quit. I saw a doctor, and they said I had a horrible mental trauma from the event. They put me on disability for a while and told me to see a therapist. It just fucked with me, you know? I never talked about it with anyone. During the investigation, I stayed quiet. People asked me what I thought was going on, and I would tell them I don't want to talk about it. It hasn't been until recently that I started opening up to people about it.
I see. Speaking of Jack, I have these notes from the detectives referring to him. The first one reads, "Tried to find Jack. Said he was out of town. We'll try again at a later date." And the second one said, "Looked for Jack. Roommate answered. Said he was gone, taking care of something. Doesn't know when he'll return." Do you have any idea what happened to him?
Wow. Hearing those make it sound way worse than what actually happened. Okay, so Jack isn't from around here, but came here to attend school. While he was finishing up school, he had some personal things going on. His mother was sick, and staying in college for so long and making minimum wage, it made it tough to get enough money for a flight home to see his family. Around the time he had finally saved enough to fly home, the murder happened. It pissed him off and freaked him out at the same time. See, Derek made a passing comment to Jack about how he told the cops that Jack knew something about it. It was a vague comment, one that was extremely off-putting for him. Derek, being the total dick that he is, probably made it seem pretty bad. And it scared Jack. He thought that the police were coming after him, thinking that he had something to do with it. At least, that's what he thought after Derek's comment. So, he was getting ready to put all that money he saved for an airplane ticket towards a lawyer. He was ready and willing to talk to the cops. He knew he had nothing to do with it, and felt like what he had to say could help the investigation. But at the same time, he didn't know how he would be approached.
How he would be approached?
Yeah, like, if they were going to be cool and have a conversation with him, or if they were going to beat down his door and treat him like a suspect. So he hired the lawyer and waited. And waited. And kept waiting. A week and a half later, he and a couple of his friends went on a trip to the beach for the weekend. He came back to hear that the cops were looking for him while he was gone. Now, I don't know if they tried to get in contact with him or not, but over the next couple of weeks, his mother's health took a turn for the worse. He needed to make the trip home to be with his mother before she passed away. So he left. During that time, the detectives apparently tried to get into contact with him once more, but he was gone. Jack told me they never called him. They just went to his place to try and talk to him, and that was it. Maybe at that point they didn't need him since they already had that guy in custody. I don't know.
That's interesting, considering they never charged anyone with the murder.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. So weird.
Do you remember what it was he had to say?
All I remember is that it had something to do with someone at the event that night. Someone who seemed a bit off. Like they were hiding something. I just wish I could remember more.
Do you still talk to Jack now?
I don't. After his mom passed away, he came back to finish school and went back home as fast as he could. We did get to talk before he left, and we promised we would keep in touch. But as life would have it, that didn't happen. We drifted apart, sadly.
Damn. That's a shame.
Yeah. Maybe what Jack had to say wasn't as important as he originally thought then.
Or maybe what he said was important, and the detectives missed out on a key piece of evidence that could have helped solve this case.
Maybe it did. Maybe it did. But it just doesn't make sense for them to... Huh.
While Jack eludes me right now, speaking with Lacey really shed some light on the situation. It's interesting that he seems so willing to talk to detectives, yet they never got a hold of him or followed up with him. There were attempts, but with how it appears on paper, they seem to be indifferent. Possibly they thought, if we get a hold of him, great. If not, oh well. Rather than, we need to find this person immediately. Now, Lacey's conversation wasn't the only thing that occupied my time this week. I got the next set of files from Janine. True to her warning, these files were a complete shit show, to put it kindly. The files did contain audio tapes, but they were very short. They were interviews with Andy and Chloe, the two friends who were with John and Nathan that night, as well as another person whom I'll talk about in a moment. It sounded as though they were interviewed over the phone, as the quality of these clips aren't as great as the prior ones. Chloe, if you recall from episode 1, doesn't remember much about that night. However, this time around, she sounds so defeated, and it's chilling to hear her talk.
Look, I told you, I don't remember too much. But what I do remember is we'd gotten into the Drunken Bell at about 5. It was about maybe an hour before this thing started. And while we were waiting outside, I remember John and Nate really getting into a heated argument. I want to say it was something about one of John's exes. I thought he was supposed to be there. And it got all heated to the point Nate had to step away from the line. I don't remember if they made up or not. If they did, well, I wasn't paying attention. I just wanted to have fun. What if this is my fault?
That's just painful to hear. In her previous interview, she was still recovering from a night of fun, but now it's sunk in that one of her best friends is gone. While it wasn't shown on the tape, there was a police note stating that Chloe just kept crying afterwards, saying that this was all her fault. She became so inconsolable that they were unable to get anything more from her. Equally heartbreaking was Andy's interview. It sounded like Detective North was asking Andy about the argument that occurred between John and Nathan. This is what I could retrieve from her tape.
I remembered what the argument was about now. Apparently John's ex-boyfriend William was going to be at the event we were going to, and, well, John really didn't like that at all.
Why is it that John didn't like William being there?
I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but William just freaked him out.
Did they argue about this before?
It wasn't the first time. They've argued about this a couple times before in the past, but that night was just really bad. I remember people were looking in our direction, practically gawking. And eventually, Nate left the line in an effort to stop the argument.
Do you know where Nathan went after that?
No clue. After arguments, he usually walks by himself to try and calm down.
Did the two of them speak to one another after this incident?
They did. It was later in the evening for us, at about 11:30, was what I told the cops before. They stayed apart from one another up until then. But when they did talk, it was the usual, "I'm sorry, and we'll talk about it when we get home." They never fully got to talk about it in the end, huh? I knew I should have stepped in to stop this before it got out of control. They never argued like that. I should have done something. It's not like I was expecting my best friend to be murdered that night.
Although Andy seemed to hold her composure more than Chloe, they both seemed equally broken up about this. Not that I blame them. And finally, we have the third tape. This one was a bit of a pain to work with because it was somehow severely damaged. So much so that I only have this one small clip for you.
I honestly don't remember getting a phone call from any of them. Believe me, if I had, I would have been out there looking for them too.
Now, you're probably wondering who that was, as was I when I listened to the tape. It was unmarked for some reason, and I didn't have a name to go by. Luckily, there were police notes that helped me identify who this was. As it turns out, that was the voice of John Doughtry, the older sister of John. Presumably, Ketsia was asked if she had received a call when Nathan, Andy, and Chloe were first trying to look for John, to which she replied with what I just played for you. A couple of questions were scribbled, such as if she knew anyone who could have a motive for killing John, what their living arrangement was like at the time, as well as the kind of person John was. The notes seemed to point out that she wasn't as helpful as they thought. Why they think that, I don't know, since I can't listen to the rest of the interview. The rest of these notes from the initial murder investigation are unhelpful. Did these detectives lack the patience to take proper notes? How have some of the notes gone missing? Perhaps these files were moved around and some information was misplaced. Regardless, we definitely have some work cut out for us. Now, I could have just sat here and gone over every last note in this box while speculating as to what it all means, but that wouldn't do. For the record, I did go through most of the notes. They are a convoluted mess, to say the least. I decided to do some investigating on my own. Where do I begin? Well, in the box of police notes, I found a list of names titled People of Interest, complete with check marks next to each of the people interviewed by the detectives. This list included various bar patrons, the gentleman who ran the event at the Drunken Bell, people labeled as event volunteers, someone who was part of the entertainment for the night, as well as some of the employees who worked that night. Using this list, I spent a majority of my week tracking down each person to find out what exactly they told the police 5 years ago. This was hit or miss for me. While some people were easy to reach for a recorded interview, others were harder. Some had so little info on the notes that it was nigh impossible to find them. Other times, while I did get in contact with them, they either didn't want to talk to me or they chose not to respond to my inquiries. In fact, there was a specific individual that comes to mind, but I'll get to that in a little bit. My investigation started at the Drunken Bell. For a number of reasons, I figured it was a good starting point. Firstly, this is where the murder took place, as well as where the detectives started their own investigation. Secondly, there were a few names on that list that I recognized. One of them was a cook named Denise, and the other is a regular named Jeff. Before heading over there, I called to make sure that Denise would be there, and if she's there, it also meant that Jeff was going to be there. He's had a thing for Denise for quite some time. Sadly, Denise doesn't work there anymore. Swing and a miss. So it was time for plan B. Search the internet and try and find her. Luckily, that didn't take too long, as I found her pretty quickly. We exchanged emails and soon she agreed to an interview as well. But that's not all. Turns out she and Jeff ended up getting together. So she got a hold of him, and he also agreed. So I got to talk to both of them at once. Well, kind of at once. Jeff was on his way from work, so I started talking with Denise as we waited.
Adrian, good to hear from you. It's been a while.
That it has. How have you been?
I've been fine. How about you, Mr. Hotshot Journalist?
Well, as I mentioned in our emails, I'm looking into the murder of a man named John Doughtry, whose body was found here 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know what kind of help I'll be, but I can absolutely try.
Well, the investigators had you on a list of contacts to speak to, and I was wondering if you happen to remember talking to them back when the case was being investigated 5 years ago.
I vaguely remember talking to someone about it. I remember the day they found the body better than talking to a detective about what happened, or my conversation with detectives about what happened. Not that I was much help, since I didn't know who the guy was.
I see. Do you happen to know why they chose to talk to you then?
I don't. But I want to say they showed up to the bar a couple days after the body was found, just to question anyone and everyone. All I remembered was that I worked there that night, although I wasn't paying attention to the event at all. We were training a new cook, so a lot of my attention was on him. You know, training and all. Yeah, that's about it. I worked the night of the murder, but that was it.
It wasn't long before Jeff made his way over, which gave me a chance to talk to him as well.
I didn't know we were starting already.
It's no problem at all. I'm Adrian, the journalist currently writing about the unsolved murder of John Doughtry, whose body was found in a dumpster 5 years ago.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, that's right. Oh, shit. Can I swear? Damn it, I did it again.
Ha! No worries, man. It's a project. I'm just working on it for fun.
Okay, cool. I might have already asked this, but why talk to me?
Well, your name was on a list of people the detectives wanted to talk to, and sadly their notes of all the interviews are terrible. So I'm going around to see if people remember what they told detectives 5 years ago, if remember the murder at all.
Man, I kind of remember talking to someone. I definitely remember the way they came in and just kind of took the place over for a few hours. I swear they went person to person trying to get information that they could. By the time one of the cops got to me, they sounded desperate, like they hadn't heard anything useful at all.
Did you have anything to tell them?
Well, luckily for them, I saw the news that morning and heard a report about a guy being found in a dumpster. He looked familiar to me. I didn't go to the bar that night because I saw a huge group of people lined up outside. Fuck that. I wasn't going to go and wait in line. Anyway, he was out there in a crazy argument with another dude. Some of us thought that they were going to go to blows with how intense the yelling was. The other guy just walked away after a certain point, though. That's all I remembered.
Well, you seem to remember it vividly.
Well, yeah, they made me tell the same story 2 different times. Once when they first showed up at the bell, the second time about a week later when a man showed up and questioned some of us again.
Were you questioned the second time?
No, I wasn't working that day, luckily.
That was something interesting that isn't in the notes at all. The fact that they questioned people at the Drunken Bell multiple times. But how brief it appears in their notes, you would assume that they only went there one time, not multiple times. Afterwards, I got in contact with a man who created the event that John and his friends were there for, Leonard Massey. Leonard, or Leo as he's commonly referred to, is a locally known LGBT activist. 5 years ago, he put together what he thought would be a fun monthly event at the Drunken Bell called Prideful Nights, where LGBT community members could come together and be themselves for once. Here's what he had to say about it. So Leo, you ran this event called Prideful Nights 5 years back. What was the main idea for this event?
Well, it was originally supposed to be a monthly get-together for the LGBTQ plus community. A night where we could all just grab some drinks, meet some people, and enjoy being ourselves with nothing to hide.
Then why choose the Drunken Bell for the event?
Well, that's the thing, Adrian. Well, now we have a gay club in town. 5 years ago, there wasn't one for miles. We would have had to drive all the way out to a little place in LA if we wanted to find an actual gay club for an event. Not everyone wants to drive through awful traffic for only a couple hours of fun. Luckily, the owner of the Drunken Bell was extremely friendly to the LGBTQ community, so it was easy to approach him about having an event at his bar. And then...
That changed after this murder, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It changed everything. The owner didn't want us to have events there anymore because of the murder. Not that I blame him for that. The murder really brought some negative publicity to the place. And I still feel so bad about that, like, to this day.
How did you feel about the murder?
When I found out about the murder, I honestly didn't know what to do. Prideful Nights was the first event I had ever put together. And that Sunday, I was on top of the world. A bunch of people told me that they had a lot of fun Saturday, and that they were all super excited for the next one. But then Monday rolls around, and I'm being told that the body of one of the attendees was found in a dumpster. I was in shock. Someone was killed at my event. It was like someone in my immediate family had been killed. Nathan helped pull everything together and hired a photographer for me. I knew them. We all knew them. And after that, I never wanted to plan an event again. It brought up such painful memories, you know?
It's strange to think about it, but at the same time it makes sense. When you are a part of a community that has been persecuted for so long just because of who you are, you tend to create a bond with others like you, and thus form a family bond with them. This is a family that loves and accepts each other for who they are, so losing someone from that sort of community only hurts that much more. Such a strong sentiment was affirmed by another person I got in touch with, thanks to Leo, and they were one of the entertainers from the event, famously known as Cinnamon Lace, a burlesque drag queen who performed the first Prideful Nights event. Here's what they had to say.
Oh, I remember that night. It was a fantastic evening. I met so many wonderful people before and after my performance. It's one of the things I love about my job. Oh, it was just fantastic. I remember meeting John that night as well. I had briefly met him at a couple of Pride gatherings before, but that night I had a great conversation with him. He was always so out there and fearless. That night we talked about finding ourselves, being happy with who we are, finding good people who love you for who you are. You know, just mundane things like that. But he had so much to say about it. He had a lifetime of experience in just 26 years. Such a gem. He talked about how he was in a loving relationship, and how his friends and sister were the biggest supporters of being gay, and how he wished for everyone to have the kind of people around him that he had, which made it that much more painful to hear about his tragic death a few days later. I'm sure you heard it from Leo, but we're family, and losing people in the community hurts like losing family. For some of us, we're all we have. Our families ran us out, our old friends don't talk to us anymore, so we rely on the community for love and support. So it's just painful to think that one of us were murdered in cold blood.
Do you think it had anything to do with being gay?
I don't know, honey. If it was never put out into the public, which seems odd to me. I really don't think the cops ever found out the exact motivation was for the murder.
Do you have any idea who did it?
I don't know. It couldn't be anyone close to him. Some people tried to say his boyfriend Nathan had something to do with it, but honey, I don't see it. Those two were soulmates. They loved each other more than anything in the world. I know they had an argument that night, but baby, what relationships don't have arguments, you know? If anything, I would find it weird if they never argued at all. Even after all that, I just don't see Nate as the kind of guy who would murder the love of his life. I don't know, Adrian, honey. I just don't.
This disbelief seems common amongst the people I talked to who knew both Nathan and John. From what is tangible from the police notes, people generally believe Nathan had nothing to do with the murder. While I didn't get a hold of Andy, I did briefly get to talk to Chloe about it. Although she didn't want to be recorded for this investigation, she gave me permission to at least tell you what she told me. She agrees that Nathan had nothing to do with John's murder. She said the way Nathan reacted to the murder was completely normal for someone who just lost their life partner. He just shut down and didn't speak to anyone. He was frequently home alone, and when she went to see him, he was either catatonic or in tears. Chloe described him as an emotional wreck from the get-go, and the fact that anyone thought Nathan had anything to do with John's murder was, and I quote, completely fucking absurd. Someone I got to talk to, who is not on that list, was journalist Irene Clark, who wrote about the case when its initial investigation started to unfold. I saw that she had interviewed both detectives Anthony Thorne and Michelle North about 5 days into the investigation. Her insight was interesting to say the least, as it really painted a picture as to what was going on at that time. Here's what she had to say.
The John Doughtry case was bizarre to write about. Here we had the murder of a 26-year-old homosexual male. But aside from myself and the local news network running stories about it, no one so much as peeped a sound about it. It's hard to say why that was, because you would think this kind of story would be all over the news, but it wasn't. I can't tell you why that is, but what I can tell you is that while I was writing about it, the detectives didn't have a suspect. They were struggling to pin it on one person because they didn't have much to go off of. There wasn't much of any evidence to go off of aside from a couple of scrapings underneath the victim's fingernails. But that was so little that they couldn't come up with a precise match. They were questioning people left and right. They couldn't find any sort of motive for anyone to kill this man. There was no hate speech coming from anyone, so they ruled out hate crime as a motive. Aside from arguing with his boyfriend, he didn't start any fights. And even then, the boyfriend and close friends had confirmed that they had since made up before the victim disappeared. They didn't have much of anything to go after, and by the time I talked to them for a story about the case, they seemed exhausted. They had nothing new to report on, and they seemed frustrated about it as well.
What stood out to me specifically about this was that these detectives were frustrated about having nothing new to report. That shows, to me at least, that there was some amount of effort put into this case. But then I became confused again, because about a week after they were interviewed by Irene, they took John's boyfriend, Nathan, in for interrogation as prime suspect number 1, and until a couple days ago, I had no idea how they got to that. As I was reviewing the notes once more, I noticed a piece of paper from an interview someone did with a man from jail, labeled Donnie's interview. The notes read as follows. Donnie was there the night of the murder. Claims he saw the argument between victim and boyfriend, says afterwards he talked to boyfriend and that he wanted to teach John a lesson. Also says he helped convince boyfriend to kill John. Suggests that we follow up with boyfriend immediately. I had no clue where this came from, but the name Donnie sounded familiar. So I dug around and I confirmed my suspicions. I know who this Donnie is. To understand who this guy is, we need to go back a little. Donnie was, and still very much is, one of the regulars at the Drunken Bell, and he's quite the interesting character. He's the kind of person who will yell some random crap to start a huge fight, like it's his purpose in life. He also likes to drink copious amounts of whiskey, which gets him into trouble with the law quite often for misdemeanors such as public intoxication and disturbing the peace with bar fights. So it wouldn't be surprising if he talked to someone about this while he was in a holding cell, but I wanted to know for certain. After a second trip to the Drunken Bell to find him, I did. Unfortunately, aside from being called words that rhyme with rock and bunt, I didn't get a single word out of him. He had no intentions of talking to me and informed me that I had no business, quote, asking questions around here. As disappointed as I was, I'm not surprised that he was unwilling to talk. So I collected my things and departed. However, before I got to the front door of the bar, this man tapped me on the shoulder and told me he had overheard my question to Donnie. Then he proceeded to introduce himself. While he asked me not to give out his name for personal matters, he's one of the officers that watches over the bar, specifically Donnie. He told me he was part of the precinct around the time of the initial investigation, and told me that he was there the night Donnie talked to the cops. According to this police officer, he picked up Donnie one night after one of his drunken fights and had him held up in a cell. He later clarified that the night he was referring to was about a week and a half after John's body was found. By the time he got Donnie into his holding cell, Donnie tried to sweet-talk him into letting him out, rattling off some ridiculous things like, "I'll buy you a drink," or "I'll help you find a nice squeeze." Petty things like that. But among the things he offered, he also told the officer, "I'll tell you who killed the gay kid at the Drunken Bell." The officer was going to ignore him, but Donnie told him that not only does he know who did it, but that he helped convince the guy to do it. He claimed that he talked to a guy named Nathan who wanted to, quote, teach John a lesson, to which Donnie allegedly convinced Nathan to go after John. The officer said that Donnie seemed smug about it, although if he doesn't know if that was because Donnie was lying about it or because he knew he had a key piece of information that the detectives desperately needed. Regardless, the officer got in touch with Detectives Thorne and North to conduct an interview with the local drunk. After that, he said he didn't know what else Donnie told them since he wasn't present for the interview, nor was he working on the Doughtry case. Just for curiosity's sake, I decided to call in this morning and try to talk to either Thorne or North about this. We've seen each other on a couple of occasions, so I figured I'd try my luck. Sadly, they didn't comment on it, for now at least. Janine relayed to me that both detectives are neck deep in another murder case right now, but they would be more than willing to conduct a formal interview about this case once things slowed down. So as much as I wish I knew exactly what Donnie told the detectives that night, I don't have anything on it right now. But whatever he told them, whatever it was he said, it led to Nathan Ashford being brought in to be interviewed as prime suspect number 1. I'll be diving into that interview next week. So until then, this is Adrian Miller, signing off.
And there you have it. Episode 3 of Lost and Cold is in the bag. As always, it's Greg here from TSG, and I've got your credits. Episode 3, People of Interest, was written by myself, Mr. Greg Patron, with help from the lovely Ashley J. and Kita Creations. Vocal talent is as follows, and holy shit is there a lot of people to credit in this episode. That's Andre Adame from The Lair Project as the voice of Adrian Miller. That is Magic Reigns, the voice of Lacey Holder. That is the lovely Miranda Dunnicky as the voice of Chloe Lynn. Andy Silverman is voiced by Kita Creations. The brief moments of Ketsia Daughtry were brought to life by Chrissy Kaida from Kanan and Kaida Cosplay. That was Kari from K&K Streams as the voice of Denise, and that was myself as the voice of Jeff. Leo was voiced by Shapeshifter Cosplay, aka Ben. Thank you so much, Ben, for being a part of this project. That's Holo Ghost over there as the voice of our queen, Cinnamon Lace. And that was the voice of Chrissy Kaida yet again as the voice of that other journalist, Irene. That is Kari and Lisa with the logo design. Thank you guys so much for that incredible logo. Visuals were done by His Westerness Art. You can check him out at facebook.com/hiswesternessart. And on the audio, that was myself recording the audio with post-production help from Hologhost. Thank you so much once again, Hologhost, for all of the incredible post-production help and making this project sound fucking incredible. Thank you once again, man. Our intro music is In Moments from Granger. You can check them out at grangertheband.bandcamp.com. And our outro music is Shatter from Sam Quick. You can check out his music and his brand new album, The Way Forward, at samquick.bandcamp.com. And as always, Lost and Cold is a TSG production. It was created by myself with help from some of the most talented motherfuckers that I have had the pleasure of working with. We hope you guys enjoyed episode 3. We hope you guys tune in next Friday for episode 4, which is called Emotional Wreck. Until then, we'll catch you guys later.